Great, thank you. Yeah, initially everyone was saying dApps, and I think at this point we can all just say apps. It's probably fine. They just happen to be decentralized.
Yeah.
I'll head off like the first part of the presentation, just talk a little bit about Covalent. I'm product marketing manager at Covalent. Leibing runs all of our hackathons and is like the master of all that. And then he'll take through some project demos and just like a little bit more into the weeds with our API. So let me just share my screen. Okay, are we all good?
Yep.
I'm gonna assume yes.
We're good.
So welcome to Intro to Web3 with One Unified API. We're going to explain what that means in just a second. So a little bit of the agenda for today. First, Web3 data trends and challenges. So without assuming that everybody is already familiar with the jargon, like what even is Web3, I'll kind of explain just a quick overview of that and where we sit as a data company, which is what Covalent is, and what sort of things people are building in this space. And then going into a little bit more about our product, which is the Covalent API, which is the tool that developers use essentially to build things like NFT galleries or like crypto wallets or really anything that's prominent that you can do with on-chain data. So we'll dive a little deeper. We'll also touch just on the Covalent Network, which is kind of what underpins our entire company. So it's the way that we're actually decentralizing to be a little bit more native to the space, and also just like how that defines our product further and like what the implications are for being a decentralized data company and why we might want to do that. And then we'll go into a couple of demos. So really excited to get started and chat with you all here today. So what is Web3, just for those that aren't familiar, or maybe you know the word, but you haven't really explored the history. You can kind of break down the history of the web into these three different economies that you'll see on the slide. So just like at its very base level, people describe the difference between Web 1, 2, and 3 as the read economy, the like read and write, and then the read, write, execute, which is also called read, write, own. So what the differences are is initially, we're talking like 90s, 2000s, first versions of like the internet. You're only accessing the internet to read information. So these are like static websites or even email, but you're not like actually writing to the internet or writing to the web. So that's where the platform economy kind of comes in, which is what people would still recognize as like where we are today outside of crypto, which is just these innovations of like social media platforms and logging in and having a profile online, having like a digital identity, and be able to do more customization online as well, that write capacity. But kind of the problem here, and then the evolution to what we do now in what's like the token economy or Web3, is the lack of ownership that exists between like your data and the companies that you're using. So things like Facebook or Instagram, it's really popular in news stories that a lot of people have heard where data is getting exploited, or you get like spam emails or any of that, because data has really become a super hot commodity and almost like more valuable than oil in a lot of ways. So in response to that, Web3 is it basically allows you to own your own data through what you have as a wallet. So instead of logging into a website with like your credentials or something that's stored in a database that's run by that company, you're essentially taking your keys and everything that you own with you in your wallet, and you own the access to it. Nobody else does, unless you have a centralized wallet. But that's really what stands behind the industry that we're in, and then kind of the building space. So things are built differently in this space where it's more community owned. You have to build with this idea of like connecting a wallet and how people are going to interact. And it's kind of these 4 points that come out and make up the culture. So you have a space that's really open. There's no barriers necessarily to developing or to interacting with these protocols, because if you have a phone and you have like a piece of paper to write down a private key, you can create a wallet, and you can be any place on the globe. You can be in somewhere that's has a corrupt government, and you can bypass that, and you can create wealth in ways that we haven't before. It's also trustless. So what that just means is instead of these middle parties, like you might have a banker or stockbroker, you're doing kind of everything yourself and you're relying on the code of a certain platform. So if you want to go earn rewards, you're not going through a person to give you stock options or whatever it is. You're actually just staking a token, and you go through a smart contract and you understand that you're going to get a certain payout. It's permissionless, so that kind of comes back to what I mentioned earlier. It's permissionless. And then one of the really important parts for builders in this space, so developers, such as some of the people in this audience, is the composability aspect. So what composable means is that basically you break down something into bits and pieces and you can rearrange them and assemble them in different ways and build new creations, right? So in Web3, a lot of code is open source. Primarily everything is open source. So you can actually go and take bits and pieces of what other people have created and you can expand on those and innovate and use them to build your project. And you honestly can copy paste and do the exact same thing and still make money, which happens, but it's better to kind of use that as a mechanism for like innovation and to build on what other people are doing. So it's a lot more cooperative. So with that whole kind of like introduction, we're still in the really early stages of Web3. If you can say that we're in it at all, we're really just like exploring these concepts and trying to figure out like how it all works and how many people could really be impacted by tech like this. So at Covalent, we tend to think about like a couple of years into the future and try to envision the whole space in the 5 to 10 year time horizon. But what we think is like, we'll see millions of pieces of critical information that are actually stored on chain. So you could already say that this is the case, but I think we'll get to a point where instead of blockchains being this like more unapproachable or complex term, you'll use blockchains without knowing that you're using blockchains. And that's really like the point of adoption, I would say. And we also envision like multiple different blockchains. So as opposed to kind of the creation of this space where you just had the two giants like Bitcoin and Ethereum, we've seen so many more Ethereum compatible chains that have developed like Polygon or Phantom. And we've seen ones that are now developing their own architecture like Solana. So those are non-EVM chains. So blockchains can be public like that. They can also be private. So they can just be like a bank that's using a private blockchain in their system that you might not actually know about. And we see like thousands of applications that this enables essentially. And with that, a lot more users on chain, which means a lot more wallets and a lot more data that's actually that in a meaningful way to work with it needs to be extracted from blockchains. So that's kind of where we came in as Covalent. And we noticed like with people that are already building in this space, just because the data is public in theory and it's on a blockchain and you can see it doesn't mean that it's actually easy to work with. And you'll find if any of you have experimented in building in Web3, it's definitely like not user friendly. There's a pretty steep learning curve. And apart from the learning curve, it's actually like also expensive and challenging and technically challenging to actually extract like large amounts of data and what you might need to develop an application or something like that. So part of these costs are like running nodes. So in order to interact with blockchains and to pull data, you either need to run your own nodes or you pay somebody to run node infrastructure. And obviously, if you're developing something that has like a potential to have more users and you want to grow a project, your costs kind of only get more expensive. And then if you are building your own custom queries, using solutions to do that, where you're building out like a transformation engine essentially to pull data off the blockchain, that can be pretty technically challenging for people that aren't used to the stack. In some cases, you need to know like assembly script, for instance, and then even if you aren't the developer yourself, it's a lot more cost to hire people that can like maintain that infrastructure, not to mention time to actually like resync data if you need to make changes. If you've heard of Uniswap, like one of the really large DeFi protocols, it actually takes them a full week. Every time that they make changes to their architecture, it takes 7 days for it to all resync. So there's basically quite a few challenges just for developers using blockchain data. And obviously that type of thing is kind of like a barrier to good user experiences and all of the work that really needs to be done on the front end to support like better use cases, better user experience, and really accelerate like growth in this area. So that's kind of where Covalent saw the gap, I guess, and the need for a solution that's unified. So something that actually works across all chains in a standardized format. And the standardization part we'll kind of come back to, because I think we're seeing that become more and more important, especially as different blockchains kind of have, they don't have like consensus on the way that the data is stored or the way that people can actually work with it. So where Covalent sits right now is basically like a middleware layer between blockchains and between developers building applications. So instead of like writing your own custom queries or running your own nodes or doing that work, we actually just index blockchains fully and take care of the backend. And then we just make all of the data queryable through the use of our API. And the good thing about the API and why it's unified is that basically right now we index over 32 blockchains. Each time we index a new blockchain, you don't actually need to develop the project again. You can basically loop it in to another blockchain through changing a parameter. So that was really like the innovation that sparked the unified API, which is just to change a chain ID and be able to take a protocol or a wallet or anything that you've built so that your users can see assets on Ethereum and on Polygon and on all the other chains that they interact with. And you can also do analysis across different chains. And what we found is that this just enables a lot more use cases. So the big ones kind of tend to be like NFT related or anything that's kind of happening in the trends. But you also have taxation tools. So as regulations are changing, more and more people need to be able to like query their own transactions on chain, download that data. And in some cases, you have like a lot of transactions and the tax can be a mess. We also see like just more analytics and people trying to really understand the space, because obviously if you've been on Twitter, you can kind of see there's a lot of like misinformation and noise. So yeah, we think like just data literacy is important, and you don't necessarily actually need to be a developer in order to use the API, which you'll kind of see a little bit later. But just, yeah, being able to like, I kind of touched on this, but being able to query it from the cloud, you don't necessarily need to know how to code. Obviously, you'll get more out of it if you like have those skills and you can pull it into different projects. But we do have an analyst mode as well. So our API is basically, you're able to try it live from the browser. So you can see what a response would look like, which can also help you as like a new person learning the terminology and getting familiar with smart contracts. And then, as I mentioned, yeah, the multi-chain functionality is kind of the biggest thing. So it's not like a one solution for everything. I think especially in Web3, you'll always find that there's different solutions that you'll need to do different things. But for reading on-chain data, and especially if you're focused on like multiple chains and scaling, the API is really like a good solution to do that. So the Covalent Network, just to touch on it, we recently, we started as a SaaS company. So we started centralized, and that was like our founders knew only about kind of the data space, and then picked up experience in Web3 and wanted to like take Covalent all the way kind of thing. So the Covalent Network is the way that we're actually decentralizing the data querying and the indexing and everything that we do, just in order to make it like even more verifiable and in some ways efficient as well. So we've taken the first step recently with just launching like our validators essentially. So we have our node operators basically working in tandem to ensure that like the data that they extract is verifiable. So they have consensus across all of the nodes that we run, and then that's going to expand. And eventually what we'll have is this decentralized kind of marketplace for indexing and querying. So there are other people doing this, like the Graph, if you're familiar, that do decentralized indexing and querying. But we've actually taken an opposite approach, which is to start with the read aspect of the blockchain. So basically we're interested, as I mentioned before, like standardization in creating a standard format that data is responded in so that people only get familiar with that one interface, and then you don't need to learn a new chain every single time, which can be quite difficult and like kind of just another of those barriers. So this is a little bit about, kind of what it looks like. It's a bit of an overwhelming slide and it's not as relevant, so I'm not gonna like go super into it, but essentially you have the blockchains as the layer, and then you have what we've just launched are the BSP and indexers. So that's the standard way of extracting data, and then building on top of that, we'll have eventually like the storage nodes, querying nodes, and then applications and users on top. So for a developer that's interacting with Covalent, none of this is like super top of mind right now. It's just good to know that the data will be decentralized, and even more secure in that way. So here's kind of like the two major user groups, developers and then analysts. Later I'll show you our docs, which just have those two modes that you could switch between. And basically what it means is you'll either get a response in JSON format or in a CSV or a spreadsheet, which you can pull right into Google Sheets, or you can do whatever you want if you're familiar. And that's also just a good way to view the data, I think, rather than JSON, even if you are a developer. So yeah, I'll hand it off to Lei Bing to just go like a little bit more in depth and show you some real life examples and stuff. And yeah.
All right, thanks, Lei. Let me just share my screen. Okay, just to get a quick sense of the audience today, how many of y'all have heard of like Web3 before this, or is interested in joining Web3? You can like react to the raise hand button. Maybe the first question, how many of y'all have heard of Web3 before this? Okay, I see the TOHacks team. All right, very supportive. Thank you, thank you. So everyone else have not heard of Web3? Okay, how many of y'all want to work in Web3 after you graduate, or is interested in interning? Or no? So the FANG for you guys. Okay, one. I see one thumbs up by Cora, interested in working for Web3. Okay, so, and how many of you are developers? Okay, what do y'all study? Anyway, okay, we see TOHacks team is developers. Okay, awesome. Well, the reason I ask is also just to, see how I can tailor my presentation a little bit to make it more relevant for you guys. But, Web3 is an exciting space. We've had some questions just now on the differences between Web2 and Web3 companies, and to Web2 companies, how are they reacting to Web3 companies? Maybe we'll get to the Q&A at the end, but the gist of it is everyone is kind of reconciling with the fact that Web3 space is getting a bit too big, both to ignore as well as for it to go on unregulated. So lots of different jurisdictions around the world are looking at how you can regulate this space. And in my opinion, like a bit more regulation is good, right? Okay, we are supposed to look at decentralization. Web3 is all about decentralization. But if you've been following the biggest news in the last 2 weeks, which is the crash of Luna and UST, right? How decentralized is one decentralized token that has most of its powers, execution powers, concentrated on its founder, right? In a traditional democracy, I suppose that the powers are all spread out across different pillars of the political institution. But within, a so-called like decentralized Web3 institution, there's no checks and balances still. It's a lot of these are just decentralization in name only. And when push comes to shove, it is more centralized than anything. So, just put on your critical hat when examining these terms, I suppose. But back to the topic of the day, let me just show you what you can build using the Covalent API. I'll show you what some hackathon participants built in the recent one that we participated in by ETH Global. ETH Global is probably a name that you should be acquainted with if you are hacking around the Web3 space. They put up a lot of quality hackathons that we always are part of as sponsors. And you should also be following our channels so that you can keep up with what other hackathons there are that, you know, probably you can't find in the major hackathon circuits that promise very juicy and fun bounties for you to work on. So this is for Hack Money, and this is like a Treasury Risk Analytics dashboard. Let me just show you what it looks like. If you don't know the concept of Treasury, it's basically like a fund, right? A traditional, think of it as a traditional fund that instead of the money being held in banks, this money is held on chain, which is like, think of it as a safe vault secured by cryptographic technology, and you store it on chain. And then we have these things called DAOs, which is decentralized autonomous organizations, which probably hold access to these treasuries and organize themselves in their activities and their investments and their projects using the funds from this treasury. So this project that was one of the finalists of ETH Global, they created like a Treasury Risk Analytics dashboard. I think I need to input like a DAO address, so I probably won't go through that now, but let me just show you what it's supposed to look like. So yeah, if you see the screen here, this is what it's supposed to look like. If you put in the Treasury address, each treasury has an address, of course, and then you can see the total value across which months, and you can see the amount of volatility here within the treasury, and you can also see the returns of the treasury. And they have a simulation for you if you were to diversify your holdings away from one kind of asset into another asset, what's the returns that you'll get? So it's a really pretty brilliant idea using our API. So all these data points are returned using our API, which looks like this. So this is our API reference page, and they probably use get token balances for address. And let me just show you what it looks like, what the raw data looks like. As you can see, you'll get responder over JSON format, and all these are what the raw data that goes into making a graph like this, right? You just need to clean it up a bit to find the relevant stuff that you're looking at. For instance, for this address, this person holds a BNB token. How much of it? This amount, and this amount is denominated in Wei. And as you'll be more familiar with, everything in Web3 that you do typically is denominated in Wei and converted to Ether, which is the standard unit. And you multiply this, and you divide this by 10 to the power of the contract decimal. So in this case, to get how much base unit of BNB this is, take this, divide it by 10 to the power of 18, and you'll get something like maybe 1 point something. Yeah. So that's the annoying part of working with block Web3. You see lots of big numbers. Anyway, so that's one example. We've got another example of a wallet that's developed during the recent hackathon. As you can see, now I've got my address, and then you can see my portfolio value, which went down because it did some transactions. And then you can see like my transfers from, you can see the transfers of any kind of asset. So this won a prize of us because, you know, the UI is really sleek. And yeah, so you can see all the transactions that I've done, although the value fields are not updated. Anyway, all these can be checked through Etherscan. Yeah. So we've got this wallet. We've got another like pretty cute chart which charts the NFT collections decentralization index across different axes. I think, oh, we've got 1 hour for this, right? So I'm not really in a rush or anything. Yeah, I think we've got an hour, so it's got some time. Yeah, so these are all examples of winners of the very recent hackathon that we participated in, and I've shown you what our API reference looks like already, but let me just take you through some of the categories of endpoints so that you know what kind of data you can get from our API. First of all, like Leilani has suggested, we are a multi-chain API. So all these are the chains that we support, and you can get data from all these chains, so like Avalanche, a really famous one, Polygon, Arbitrum, layer 2s as well, and we're going to be supporting Optimism as well. Recently we had a hackathon with Clayton, and yeah, IOTax, all these smaller chains, we support them as well. And on the left side, you can see our data endpoints being categorized into Class A and Class B. What is Class A? Class A endpoints are the data that can be pulled from every single blockchain, right? So every single blockchain would have balances, endpoints. Every single blockchain would have maybe like NFT. They would have definitely transactions. They would have so-called like block height. You can get block information. You can get log events categorized under this base category. So Class A endpoints can be used across every single blockchain, right? They're blockchain specific, like not blockchain specific, but yeah, they're used across blockchain. Class B endpoints are protocol specific, and that's a key term that differentiates it. And if you're unfamiliar with the idea of a protocol, just think about it as a company, right? Blockchains are the base layer. The protocols are the companies that work on top of each individual blockchain. For instance, Uniswap probably exists in a couple of chains, right? They do not, Uniswap probably doesn't exist in Clayton, doesn't exist in EVMOS, doesn't exist in IOTax. So if you use this, for instance, you'll see the Uniswap usage on Ethereum mainnet, right? Let's see where our xy equals to k endpoint is supported. So you see, like xy equals to k endpoints are supported with these chains, but not all chains. Whereas Class A endpoints, for instance, token balances for address, if you want to find out how much I own on Avalanche chain, then you can just use this to find my balances. Anyway, that's the difference between Class A and Class B. Within Class A, we've got 4 categories, right? I've shown you what balances does. It gives you the balance of any address that you input. We've got historical portfolio value. It shows you the historical portfolio value, which is used for something like this, right? It gives you the historical balance. If you're familiar with API data, like this, quite a standard kind of financial data that companies like MarketStack, companies like Rapid API or Yahoo API, they all provide this. I think Yahoo API is discontinued. And then you can see all the token transactions that I did, which you find in this page, right? So all these endpoints are kind of connected to these front-end applications that you see here. And that's basically what our product is, actually. And what happens is, of course, you just, this historical portfolio value takes some time, but you just, in your code, you just integrate this, you get a response, you clean it up, you display them. That's it. So yeah, that's basically it for our product. Remember this page, covalenthq.com/docs/API to give it a try yourself. Sign up for an API key, which is free, and give it a try. Right, our product is completely free at this point. And I don't think we've got plans to put up pricing, and you can call up to 5 API requests per second. So let me just show you what can be built using our NFT endpoints. We can get all NFT IDs within a particular NFT collection. So anyway, yeah, I'll show you something else. So our NFT market cap endpoint allows you to get all the NFT collections on multi-chain. Right now it's supported on Ethereum, Polygon, BSC, I believe, and others. Not all, but some. So here I built a basic React component that that displays the top Ethereum collections, NFT collections. Some images are broken, but that's what it is when you're using a hugely aggregated API. And yeah, here's the top 10 collections. And wow, some are supporting GIFs. That's pretty cool. And this is their market cap. As you can see, the common ones, you probably heard about 8 Yacht Club. Its market cap is 1 billion. It's got 9,931 unique wallet owners. And you see some of the ones like Azuki Bean having like 500 million market cap. And behind the scenes, what's happening is I just simply used one endpoint, and that is the NFT market endpoint. Global, within our docs, it's NFT market global view. You can check it out. Right now, it is under maintenance. I think it'll be up in a week's time or so. And that one is a really powerful one that allows you to build something like this within your site. So all I did here was to call the data, right? I made a call to the data using Axios, and then I set the state of the data, and I clean it up a bit, and I displayed them. I used the React data table component to kind of put it in a table format here. And there you go. I just displayed these rows: collection name, market cap, unique wallet addresses. And I displayed it here. And you have it here, right? So each particular endpoint allows you to build a different kind of thing. And of course, you can slice and dice the data or make calculated fields to display whatever you want to display on your front end. That's about all that I have to cover, actually. Just a quick note, because the title of our presentation is Intro to Web3, right? Web3 data, how you can build in Web3. The typical Web3 stack that you hear is probably like Solidity, React, Rust, Golang. So that's your typical Web3 stack. So the problem with that approach, as what Leilani has mentioned, is that blockchain data doesn't come in aggregated formats. It's a point and query kind of format. So let's say I'll try building this page using web3.js, right? You need to find out all the contract addresses of like, God knows how many top contracts, and you need to pull them individually. And then you need to find how many transactions are done using them, and then you display the market cap. So you probably have to write like, hundreds of queries in order to get this. But using our aggregator API, all we did is to use one single query, and it's a 15-minute job. So yeah, that's the problem that we're essentially trying to solve. If you come from a traditional SQL database, relational database background, you'll find that blockchain data is a pain in the ass to work with because relational databases allows you to have joins, and the data is typically stored in very structured formats, right? And you know the data structure in advance. But on blockchain, because of its permissionless nature, the data is also structured very awkwardly. And for you to first of all, get aggregated data, it's not easy, right? And it's a good challenge for everyone to try the different technologies, including Web3.js, including whatever other ways you make queries to the JSON RPC nodes. It's not easy, and secondly, it's not structured. So that's where we come in to provide that ease of use for developers. Yeah, hopefully by the end of today, if you want to build a Web3 app, right, which is data focused, you can just use our API to build the front end. Solidity is for you to do writing onto the data. Web3.js allows you to write onto the blockchain itself as well. So our API is useful for front end. Most of the stuff that we see at front end, so like dashboard, visualization, data analytics. Yep, that's about it. One last thing is you can also get the data in CSV format. So there you go. Just change it to analyst mode and you have all the data of the balances of this address, for instance, as a CSV, and you can do your own analytics. This is very useful when you're doing exploratory data analysis for endpoints that you're not familiar with, for instance. And you can download it in a Excel sheet or Google Sheets as well. Yes, that's all we have for you guys. I think we can open it up for questions right now. There were some very good questions that was asked previously. I'll just maybe like go through it so that other people who are not part of this webinar can kind of tune into that. Would Web3 be a replacement of Web2, or would it be working simultaneously? They will be working simultaneously. It will not be a replacement at all. It's like it's a different kind of tech stack and use case, right? We've seen a lot of people trying to build a decentralized Twitter or like a decentralized Facebook or Instagram. I mean, the products that come out of it, they're not very impressive. Like there's a reason why there's certain use case for blockchain technology, and you're not trying to like force fit something that Web2 does really well into the Web3 tech stack. And I think society in general is generally learning what Web3 does well and what it does not do well. And even if you're building like Web3 apps, right, you'll still be using the Web2 tech stack for the front end. And, you know, yeah, read and write functions will still be the core of, I think, society at large.
And there are still like trade-offs to decentralization often comes with like less efficiency. So that's the question that a lot of people ask is what actually needs to be decentralized, or like what makes sense for it to be trustless. So if you want more ownership and if you want like horizontal institutions and voting power, then yeah, Web3 is like amazing for all those types of topics. But as like being said, like there's definitely a hybrid where not everything makes sense to adopt that tech or to adopt that like type of system.
Yeah.
Our opinions, but like, because there's some people who place everything, but just to like give a builder's perspective.
Exactly. Like you got to be critical as well when you enter the space, right? Like, and for instance, like DAOs, you know, they're these idealized, you know, organizational formations. But I think a lot of what DAOs are plagued with in reality is, like Leilani mentioned, the speed of decision making. Like when you're so horizontal and so flat, like how do you come into consensus effectively and efficiently on just everyday decisions that an organization needs to make? So all these are questions that that you have, and also these are spaces that will exist for traditional organizations. For large tech companies who are primary stakeholders of Web2, do you think this type of technology impacts them, since Web3 is supposed to be more inclusive and accessible? And I mentioned for large tech companies, a lot of them are jumping onto this train.
It's also the money. Like, I mean, we were seeing more of that adoption from large companies like Visa, and like, I don't know, the NFL and stuff, creating NFTs, and even government initiatives like people actually adopting cryptocurrency, or just investing really heavily and maybe not even admitting that they are, but they are. And that type of activity happens a lot when markets are up. So like when we're in a bull cycle in crypto, then obviously everybody kind of wants to be part of that, and big companies want to understand how they can monetize this as well and like include it in their platforms. But what's happening right now is we're entering more of like a bear market, or you could say that we're in it, after kind of recent events, if you follow like the depegging of a stable coin that just recently happened. But what that means is like we'll actually see who's legitimately interested in adopting kind of like Web3 tech, and which large companies are going to take this time to like really build something out, because it is a good time to build, or who's like only really interested in capitalizing on something that's, you know, like already working and making a lot of money.
Yep, exactly.
Web3 is on the rise and supposed to be decentralized. Isn't it currently controlled by? Yeah, this is a good point. Will it change enough so it doesn't seem similar to Web2? Yeah, so there's like the in theory versus the in practice. And it's definitely good to point out that like even decentralized companies aren't decentralized. And that word is also just like kind of complicated, because you can be, from a tech perspective, decentralized, it can be spread across nodes, but from a voting perspective, you can have like 90% of the vote maybe held by this one person or group or organization. So definitely what I've observed is like there are still a lot of organizations are still kind of, I wouldn't say it's like democratic necessarily, like the voting power is still pretty heavily skewed, and especially in projects that haven't really like released their tokens that much. A lot is held in reserves over like a couple people, and just by kind of a small number of companies. I guess you could say that like there's definitely diversity, but there are a small few who are kind of the giants who succeed. And even now we're seeing more like acquisitions of other companies. So like Nansen, which is a big data company, recently acquired another charting protocol. So we're kind of starting to see that build together, where if somebody's doing really good, it's going to kind of become more of a like Web3 conglomerate.
And like how OpenSea just like acquires like so many NFT projects, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So you'll find that like it's still more, I guess, like clicky in practice, but the permissionless element is what I still think makes it different, because even though like voting power or control might be like in a smaller number of companies right now, it's also because the space is smaller, and there's nothing like preventing you from actually coming in and disrupting it and building and creating your own communities and things like that. It's just much faster to turn the tables, I think. And the community aspect is super huge in terms of like keeping projects legitimate, and yeah, just like keeping projects accountable, because you have such a closer relationship with your users. If you have anything to add, go ahead.
What does scalability look like? Currently mining and having it go through the network takes time. Yep. So a lot of this space has been focused on supply side scalability. What that means is that Ethereum, for instance, currently has 4,000 TPS, I believe, which is it 4,000? I can't, yeah, but it's quite a limited number of transactions per second, which means that, for instance, Visa or MasterCard, right? They probably have like, you know, at least like 20,000 transactions per second or 50,000. Yeah, like huge amounts, because everyone's using it at the same time and they need to be able to accommodate to that. If Ethereum is going to get mainstream, like, you know, it can't just have like like 4,000 people making transactions at the same time. So yeah, there's sharding technology as well, which some blockchains have implemented, but scalability looks like what traditional payment is looking like today, right? And I think on the tech side, it's quite deep technical issues that every single blockchain is trying to solve. And some of them are already on their way. The way I like to think about it is just like how you guys are probably too young to remember, but there are these like dial-up days, right? Back when pre-good Wi-Fi, and then you just like connect to this really slow
Dial-up
internet.
days?
Do you know,
No.
Ilani? You
No.
haven't heard of dial-up? Oh my God.
No, I
But
know
basically
what
when
dial-up is. I just didn't know dial-up days.
dial-up days, wait,
Oh, I thought that's what you said.
oh no, dial-up days, the
Oh,
days of
okay.
dial-up.
Right. Okay. Okay.
Oh yeah, someone knows dial-up.
Right now,
Yeah,
Ethereum is
we
like dial-up.
connect.
That's a good
Um,
analogy. Yeah.
that's a good one. Yeah, so back in those days, that's a scalable supply side scalability problem. But society has a way of overcoming that pretty quickly. And before you know it, it's just in a matter of years, like we have blockchains boasting up to, I think, like 10,000 TPS and one second, an instant transaction finalization. So it will catch up definitely,
Yeah.
just like how our Nokia phones became smartphones. And that's my own personal prediction. Of course, the timeline and stuff is up for debates.
I think it's a bit like batteries, actually. If you think about like right now, there's sort of this like trade-off between like efficiency and safety. So this
Yeah.
way where like if you try to make batteries more efficient, you can like combust
Mm,
them. If you try to make blockchains more efficient, like Solana is one of the ones that's it's like one of the fastest blockchains, but some people are distrusting because they say that it's not decentralized enough, for instance, and it doesn't compare to like Ethereum. So kind of depends. Like if you're really, really careful about security, then you might want to stay with slower blockchains for now that you understand like the mechanism more and it is more distributed. But then, if you're willing to take like a little bit more risk, you can have like way faster transactions. But I think eventually it'll converge because there's no way like Ethereum is not going to further try to solve that problem.
yeah. So yeah, tech adoption cycles, right? We're still rather in the early-ish stages of this technology adoption. And it's good to get in when it's early in terms of, for personal kind of like career or whatever.
Yeah, just a note on that, if you are like interested in careers in this space, and maybe that's part of the reason people are here, your career cycle in Web3, 1 year is like 10 years. So you have the chance to like, one, learn a lot, but two, gain a lot of experience. And because the space is so nascent, most of these companies are still like classified as startups. So that is part of the culture. You just like accelerate really fast, take on more responsibilities, work on interesting projects. And yeah, I think it's just like good for personal growth and getting experience. If people are kind of looking for that, I would recommend it if you want like something fast paced and interesting, but it's a little crazy.
Yeah, but also always do your own research within this space, because unlike other traditional industries where there are certain guardrails against you losing all your money, this one plays a lot with money, but like at the risk of the individuals who are partaking in it. So yeah, always do your own research if you want to, especially if you want to invest in a protocol, yeah, or a cryptocurrency.
The question about interoperability.
Mm.
Yeah, that's definitely like kind of goes back to this multiple chains emerging and the tech not really keeping up with that right now. So it is a pretty like clunky experience to like one, be just a user that's moving between different chains, and bridging technology is pretty hard or like kind of sketchy as well. But as a developer, it's also a challenge because like building applications that are compatible with different chains and like keeping that in mind. And that's kind of part of Covalent's focus, just with like being able to change chain IDs and standardize the data response. So like the JSON that Leiping showed you in the docs is the same. It's the same exact response, but just different numbers, obviously, for like any different chain, anything you create, even when we are branching into indexing non-EVMs. So like we do support Solana through our balances endpoint now, but that took the team like months in order to index just the components we need for balances, because the architecture underneath it is so different. So interoperability is definitely like a big challenge, and you'll see like it's pretty clunky experience right now, but we're kind of hoping to like, I don't know, solve some of that. Basically like standardizing the read, making like basically read scalability. So standardizing the methods so we can all like extract data in the way that's the same.
Yeah, and read scalability is important for transparency within this space, because what's the point of like having these like public decentralized blockchains when no one can access them, right? That's like a misnomer, because access is a huge part of something being public. And that's what we're trying to solve. We make it easy for you to see what's hiding like beneath the hood for every single blockchain in an easy way. Yeah.
Any compelling solutions to interoperability like Cardano, Polkadot?
Those are like substrate parachains, or like
subnets like Avalanche is doing.
Yeah, like Avalanche. Like all of them are kind of like doing something like this.
Yeah. Polygon doing supernets as well.
Yeah. So that in itself is still not so-called like interoperability in the like more meta sense, right? Because when we talk about like interoperability, we're thinking of blockchain networks talking to each other. And there's that huge security aspect that like someone like Vitalik pointed out. And we saw it happening in the hacks of the bridges, right? Which saw like insane amounts just drained out of the bridge contracts and lost essentially, or locked up. So those solutions exist on a lower level in terms of interoperability within the networks themselves. Like they're all kind of churning out this ability for you to start a new blockchain, but under our kind of like bigger umbrella of network. So it depends on which scale of that you're talking about, I suppose.
Yeah, I think it's kind of analogous to like local communities almost. Like
yeah,
there's more interoperability between like a group as well, but it's not necessarily between every single.
Yeah, they're like building the roads between their villages, but not investing in the plains. Or they are investing in like between nations, right? But the planes just keep crashing.
Ouch. Yeah, good questions, all of these.
Yeah, great questions, guys. Yep. Any more questions? We've got 3 more minutes. Yeah.
But if you want to like interact with Covalent community more or ask us questions, you can go to our website or join our Discord, or stay in touch with the community that way. So it's covalenthq.com if you're interested. And then it has all our links there.
Yep. All right, guys. If not, I think this is a very fun and interesting workshop. If there are no coding questions, is it significantly different being a project manager, program manager for a Web3 company? Okay, so yes. I'm a project manager-ish. Leilani can speak about a product marketing manager kind of role. Or would you want to go ahead first?
Yeah, I'll just say quickly, like, one, there's a difference already in that roles aren't necessarily as unbundled. So in a company, like, you're not probably going to have project managers and product managers and product marketing. You're probably going to have like one person that does all of that, which is kind of the role, because it's just so hard to find somebody that can really like understand things from end to end. But those are if you're able to do that, you'll succeed. But I think it's different because in Web 2, you have typically more of like a long time horizon, a vision that you can work towards, and things move at a slower pace, or the markets around you kind of aren't as volatile. So Web3 is super responsive, and any role that you're in, you are going to be like pivoting likely to what's happening around you. Or if you're a protocol that's like SushiSwap or Uniswap or anything that's built on top of a blockchain, your product is directly influenced by what the underlying blockchain is doing as well. So I think like, yeah, you have to be pretty adaptable, and then it's also more focused on execution rather than vision, which isn't really a bad thing. But because the industry is really young, it's just like shipping things, like build in public, have your community participate more. And you kind of just like need to try and fail a lot more, I guess. And then go with the successes. Living can add more.
Yeah, not much difference, I would say. It's the same kind of skill set. It's just a different industry. They're both tech industries. So and the tech stack is pretty similar. Maybe Web3 it's got its own quirks and nuances, but yeah, same skill set. Yeah, basically that. Yeah,
faster paced.
Faster pace. No, some Web2 companies like they have huge pace as well.
Yeah, if
really
you were
fast.
like doing well on Wall Street or something, this is probably fine for you.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks everyone for the amazing questions, and thank you to the TOHacks team for having us.
Yeah, thanks.
All the best with your hackathon next week.
Thank you, and the presentation was great. Thank you so much for it.
Thank you.
That basically ends our workshop. So thank you all for attending.
Thanks, guys. See you around. Bye.